The Roman Empire did not vanish. It became the Catholic Church. The seeds of transformation. Welcome to a journey through history that challenges everything you thought you knew about the fall of the Roman Empire. The year 476 AD is often cited as the end of the Western Roman Empire, when the last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed. But what if the empire didn't collapse? What if it transformed into an institution that still shapes the world today, the Catholic Church? In this video, we'll explore this provocative idea across 5 key phases, showing how the Roman Empire's structures, culture, and authority evolved into the Catholic Church. Let's start with the origins, how Christianity took root in the heart of Rome. In the 1st century AD, Christianity emerged in the Roman province of Judea as a Jewish sect centered on Jesus Christ. According to Catholic tradition, Jesus named the apostle Peter the leader of his church, saying, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Matthew 16:18. Peter, considered the first pope, traveled to Rome, the empire's capital, where he was martyred around 67 AD. This tied the early Christian community to Rome, giving the city a spiritual significance that would grow over time. For nearly 3 centuries, Christians faced intermittent persecution. Emperors like Nero and Diocletian viewed Christianity's monotheism as a threat to the Roman state's polytheistic religion, which tied loyalty to the emperor's divine status. Despite this, Christianity spread rapidly, especially among urban populations and the lower classes. By the 3rd century, the Church in Rome was acting as a central authority, resolving disputes and shaping doctrine, as historian Eamon Duffy notes in his work on early Christianity.
The pivotal moment came with Emperor Constantine in the early 4th century. In 312 AD, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine reportedly had a vision promising victory under a Christian symbol. He won, and in 313, with co-emperor Licinius, he issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity across the empire. This wasn't mere tolerance. Constantine actively supported the church, funding grand basilicas and convening the Council of Nicaea in 325 to standardize Christian doctrine. The Nicene Creed, established there, became a unifying statement of faith, aligning the church with imperial power. Constantine's motives were both spiritual and political. The empire was fracturing under internal strife and external invasions, and he saw Christianity as a unifying force. By 380, Emperor Theodosius I took this further with the Edict of Thessalonica, declaring Nicene Christianity the state religion. The term Catholic, meaning universal, emerged to distinguish this orthodoxy from rival sects like Arianism. The church began adopting Roman administrative structures, with bishops functioning like provincial governors, and the Bishop of Rome gaining prominence as the Pope. This early phase shows how Christianity went from a persecuted sect to a state-backed institution, deeply integrated with Roman systems. The church's growing authority in Rome, the empire's capital, set the stage for it to inherit Rome's legacy. But how did it step into the power vacuum after the Western Roman Empire's fall? Let's explore that next. The Church as Rome's successor. When the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the last emperor was gone, but the story doesn't end there. The Catholic Church stepped into the chaos, becoming a stabilizing force and, arguably, the empire's direct successor. This block examines how the Church adopted Roman structures and expanded its influence, preserving Rome's legacy in a new form.
The fall of the Western Empire left a fragmented Europe. Germanic tribes like the Ostrogoths and Visigoths carved out kingdoms, but they lacked Rome's centralized governance. The Church, however, was uniquely positioned to fill this gap. Its organizational structure, already modeled on Roman bureaucracy, mirrored the empire's hierarchy. Dioceses paralleled Roman provinces, and bishops took on roles akin to governors, managing local affairs. The Bishop of Rome, now called the Pope, inherited the prestige of the imperial capital. The title Pontifex Maximus, once an imperial honor, was later adopted by popes, symbolizing this transfer of authority. The Church also preserved Roman culture. As barbarian invasions disrupted education and infrastructure, monasteries became centers for learning, copying Latin manuscripts and maintaining Roman legal traditions. Historian Peter Brown argues that the Church acted as a custodian of Romanitas, or Roman identity in a fractured world. Bishops negotiated with barbarian kings, often converting them to Catholicism, which brought these rulers under the Church's moral and political influence. A key figure in this transition was Pope Leo I, who served from 440 to 461. Leo asserted the papacy's primacy, arguing that the Bishop of Rome was Peter's successor and held supreme authority over the Church. In 452, Leo famously negotiated with Attila the Hun, persuading him to spare Rome. While the details are debated, this act cemented the papacy's role as a protector of the city and its people, filling the void left by absent emperors. The Church's influence grew as it inherited Roman legal and administrative practices. The Codex Theodosianus, a 5th century compilation of Roman laws, included provisions for the Church, blending secular and ecclesiastical authority. Bishops began overseeing local courts, handling disputes, and distributing charity, much like Roman officials once did. The Church's use of Latin as its liturgical and administrative language further preserved Roman culture, ensuring continuity in a changing world.
This period wasn't without challenges. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued in Constantinople, and its emperors often clashed with the Western Church over authority. Yet the papacy's growing independence allowed it to assert itself as a distinct power. By the 6th century, under Pope Gregory the Great, the Church was managing vast estates, feeding Rome's poor, and sending missionaries to convert pagan tribes, extending its reach beyond the old imperial borders. The Church's ability to adapt Roman systems and assert spiritual and political authority made it a natural successor to the Western Empire. But how did it consolidate this power in the Middle Ages? That's where we're headed next. The medieval Church as a new empire. By the early Middle Ages, the Catholic Church wasn't just a religious institution, it was a political and cultural powerhouse, often described as a new empire. This block explores how the Church solidified its authority, using Roman traditions to build a medieval order that rivaled the old empire's reach. The crowning of Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD is a defining moment. On Christmas Day, Pope Leo III placed a crown on Charlemagne's head, declaring him Emperor of the Romans. This act wasn't just symbolic, it was a deliberate invocation of Roman imperial tradition, with the Pope claiming the authority to anoint rulers. The Holy Roman Empire, though never as centralized as Rome, relied on the Church to legitimize its power. Charlemagne, a Frankish king, adopted Roman titles and legal codes, and his court at Aachen revived classical learning, with monks copying Roman texts. The Church's influence extended beyond politics. It shaped medieval society through its control of education, law, and morality. Canon law, rooted in Roman legal principles, governed everything from marriage to property disputes. Bishops and abbots held vast estates, functioning as feudal lords. The Church's wealth, derived from tithes and donations, rivaled that of kings, allowing it to fund cathedrals, schools, and crusades.
The papacy's power peaked under figures like Pope Gregory VII in the 11th century. Gregory's reforms strengthened papal authority, asserting the Church's independence from secular rulers. His clash with Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV during the investiture controversy showed the Church's willingness to challenge kings. When Henry defied Gregory, the Pope excommunicated him, forcing the emperor to seek forgiveness in the snow at Canossa in 1077. This moment highlighted the Church's ability to wield spiritual power as a political weapon, a tactic Rome's emperors would have recognized. The Church also expanded Rome's universalist ideals.
The concept of Christendom replaced Rome's empire's vision of a unified world. The Crusades, launched by Pope Urban II in 1095, aimed to reclaim Jerusalem, but also echoed Rome's imperial ambition to dominate distant lands. Missionaries spread Catholicism to Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, and beyond, mirroring Rome's expansion through conquest. Yet the Church faced internal challenges. Corruption, like the sale of indulgences, and rivalries with the Byzantine Church strained its authority. The Great Schism of 1054 split Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches, complicating the Church's claim to universal rule. Still, its Roman-inspired structure, centralized in the papacy, hierarchical, and legally sophisticated, allowed it to govern millions, much like the empire once did. This medieval empire of the Church shows how it inherited and adapted Rome's legacy. But how did it navigate the challenges of the modern era? Let's move forward. The Church in the modern world. As the Europe entered the Renaissance and Reformation, the Catholic Church faced new challenges, yet it continued to wield influence in ways that echoed the Roman Empire. This block examines how the Church adapted to a changing world, maintaining its Roman roots while facing secular and religious rivals. The Renaissance, beginning in the 14th century, revived interest in classical Roman culture, and the Church was at its heart. Popes like Julius II patronized artists like Michelangelo, whose works adorned the Vatican, reinforcing Rome as a cultural capital. The Church's use of Latin and its preservation of Roman texts positioned it as the guardian of classical heritage, even as humanists began questioning its authority. The Reformation in the 16th century posed a greater threat. Martin Luther's 1517-95 Theses criticized church corruption, sparking Protestant movements that fractured Catholic dominance. The Church responded with the Counter-Reformation, launched at the Council of Trent in 1545 to 1563. Trent reaffirmed Catholic doctrine, reformed abuses, and strengthened the Church's Roman-style bureaucracy. The Jesuits, founded in 1540, became the Church's intellectual and missionary arm, spreading Catholicism globally, much like Rome's legions once expanded its borders. The Church's political influence persisted, even as nation-states rose. Popes mediated disputes between European powers, and the Vatican's diplomatic corps, rooted in Roman administrative traditions, remains one of the oldest in the world. The 1648 Peace of Westphalia, which ended the 30 Years' War, recognized the Church's role in international affairs, even as secular states gained prominence. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the Church faced new challenges: the Enlightenment, industrialization, and secularism. The loss of the Papal States in 1870, when Italy unified, ended the Pope's temporal rule, but the 1929 Lateran Treaty established Vatican City as a sovereign state, preserving the Church's independence. The Vatican's global influence continued, with popes like John Paul II shaping world events, from opposing communism to promoting human rights. The Church's Roman heritage remained evident in its centralized authority, legal traditions, and universal mission. The Pope, still called the Roman Pontiff, governs 1 billion Catholics worldwide using a structure that echoes Rome's imperial administration. The College of Cardinals, likened to the Roman Senate, advises the Pope, and the Vatican's archives preserve centuries of Roman-inspired records. This block shows how the Church adapted Rome's legacy to survive modern challenges. But does this mean the Roman Empire truly became the Catholic Church? Let's wrap up with a critical look. Did the empire become the Church? We've traced the Catholic Church's rise from a persecuted sect to a global institution, arguing it inherited the Roman Empire's structures, culture, and authority. But does this mean the empire became the Church? This final block evaluates the claim, weighing evidence and addressing counterarguments to see how far the analogy holds. The case for the Church as Rome's successor is strong. First, the Church adopted Rome's organizational framework. Its dioceses, bishops, and centralized papacy mirrored the empire's provinces, governors, and emperor. The use of Latin, Roman law, and titles like Pontifex Maximus preserved Rome's cultural and legal legacy. Second, the Church filled the power vacuum after 476 AD, negotiating with barbarian kings, converting nations, and maintaining order in a fractured Europe. Third, its universalist mission, spreading Catholicism globally, echoed Rome's ambition to unify the world under one rule.
However, the analogy has limits. The Roman Empire was a secular, military state. The Church is a spiritual institution, even if it held temporal power at times. The empire's fall in 476 AD was a real collapse. Cities depopulated, trade declined, and central authority vanished in the West. The Church didn't simply replace the empire. It operated alongside the Byzantine Empire and emerging European kingdoms. Historian Norman Cantor argues that the Church was one of many successors to Rome, alongside Islamic caliphates and Germanic kingdoms, each adopting parts of its legacy. The Church also transformed Rome's heritage. While it preserved Latin and Roman law, it infused them with Christian theology, creating a new identity. The empire's universalism was territorial. The Church's was spiritual, aiming for souls rather than land. The Reformation and secularism further distanced the Church from Rome's imperial model, as nation-states and Protestant churches challenged its monopoly. So, did the Roman Empire become the Catholic Church? Not literally, but the Church undeniably inherited and adapted Rome's structures, culture, and ambitions. It became the most enduring successor to the Western Empire, carrying its legacy into the modern world. From Constantine's vision to the Vatican's global influence, the Church has been Rome's heir in ways no other institution can claim. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this perspective intriguing, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, The Bible Was Right, and share your thoughts in the comments. Was the Catholic Church truly the Roman Empire's successor? Or is this a stretch? Let's keep the conversation going.